Good evening. First of all, let's start with a question. Do you have perfect control over the actions of your body? You do? Well, I can tell you that you don't. Yes, you can make your body do lots of amazing things, but there are many involuntary movements that you've no or little control over. Things like, for example, the knee jerk when the doctor taps your knee, your heartbeat, your digestive system in all its glory, coughing, jumping when you're surprised by a loud noise, laughing, screaming in pain, and of course reaching for the TV remote as soon as Piers Morgan appears on the screen. And the main reason for many of these involuntary actions is that they're either controlled by a different part of the brain or not controlled by the brain at all. Incidentally, there is one group of people whose actions are very rarely controlled by any part of the brain whatsoever, and it's a phenomenon that's baffled doctors and scientists for centuries. These people are, of course, known as women. Yes, okay, but I digress, and I know what you're thinking. He works on the railway, what does he know about brains? I travel on trains quite a lot, and I know that there's very little brain work involved whatsoever. Well, stay with me, you'll see where I'm going with this. My pieces are always educational, and at the end of this I guarantee you'll be saying to yourself, well, that's taught me a lesson. There's another involuntary action that I read about the other day. It seems that the tube that connects to our stomach has a sharp curve in it to prevent acid leaking out, something like the U-bend in the drain pipe you find under the sink. There's also a sphincter muscle that closes off the tube until we eat or drink something, at which time it opens up in response to whatever we swallow, pushing against it. When we get older than about 50, the curve begins to straighten out due to a lot of tone in ageing muscles. That means the sphincter has to work harder to keep the stomach closed off, but it's also losing its own muscle tone. So when some acid leaks out, that's when we experience heartburn. Now there's also another centre in the esophagus, about halfway down to the stomach. If we're drowning and we swallow so much water that the esophagus fills up and water comes close to pouring over into the lungs, the sensor triggers an involuntary, forceful expulsion of fluid. Well, ordinarily it has to be drowning for this reflex to occur, but it seems that in men over about 60, it's possible to have an unfortunate combination of circumstances that can produce a really bizarre effect. If the stars are correctly aligned and the man has a drink, it's possible for the esophagus to fill up with liquid before his stomach sphincter has opened, fooling the sensor into thinking that he's drowning. Well, this can result in the spectacle of him forcibly ejecting whatever he drank out through his nose. Now, who here would not want to see that? There are also some involuntary actions that you do have some control over, things like breathing, swallowing, salivation. Most of the time they happen without any effort from you, but you can make them happen and you can also prevent them from happening. Now, as you know, I work on the railway. I often like to look at things from a railway perspective. But how, I hear you ask, could any of this have anything to do with railway operations? So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the wonderful world of railway signalling. Now, modern signalling uses three main types of signals. The most common are automatic signals, which are controlled by the passage of trains. Without getting too technical, the track's divided into sections and only one train is allowed in any one section at a time. So when a train enters a section, the wheels and the track complete an electrical circuit, which automatically switches the protecting signal back to red. In some cases, like at a level crossing, for example, an automatic signal can be overridden and the signal put to red manually. Well, these are known as semi-automatic signals. They are automatic normally, but they can be made to be controlled. And the third type of signal is the controlled signal. This one is solely operated manually by a signaller in the signal box, who will also set the route of the train in accordance with the signals. So, you could say that automatic signals are the equivalent of our involuntary actions. We don't control them, they just happen. Semi-automatic signals are the actions that are normally involuntary but can be controlled. And the controlled signals are like our voluntary actions, which are solely under our own control. In the same way that controlled signals set the route of our train, then our voluntary actions do the same for our spiritual journey. This is known as free will, and it's a gift that we all have. It's free will that makes us who we are and takes us where we want to go. Of course, free will has its disadvantages if it's misused, in the same way that a careless signalman can occasionally misroute a train. But without free will, the journey would have no point, no purpose. We all reach our destination eventually, but the route we take is largely down to our own decisions, our own route settings, if you like. Yes, there'll always be signal failures on the journey, or even the occasional bus replacement service, but it's all part of a wonderful journey. Thank you for listening.